Hey, all you Ethic cuties and the 40% of you who have still not subscribed to the Ethicsverse, welcome to the coolest place to be. I'm coming at you live from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I'm at the ECI Fellows event. It's a phenomenal event. We're talking about how ethics and compliance can, show its value inside the organization, a topic near and dear to my heart. But I survived Snowmageddon, survived that, as Jason calls it, that Connecticut cocaine that trickled on down to North Carolina. And I made it on down here. So drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat. We're going to get going here talking about a great topic, my favorite topic, managing AI work-slop. There's a work-slop problem inside your organization. I have the one and only Jason Lesandrini here. If you guys don't know Jason, get to know him. He is brilliant, very funny, very cool. We had one of the best ethics experts episodes ever, and I don't say that lightly. So check that one out. If you're here for credits, this is the place to be. You can get up to 3 credits with HRCI, CCV, and SHRM. We got accredited, so those CCV credits are going to be coming a lot faster. And I wanted to share a book that Tom Fox put out, the FCPA Survival Guide. The FCPA is back. Remember a year ago, everybody was in a panic. They thought compliance was going away because of some strongly worded executive orders. Well, now is the time to learn about FCPA. So we'll be giving away some books today. So drop your LinkedIn URL in the chat. Connect with someone today and really expand your network. It's been a total shot in the arm to be at this ECI Fellows event because, I'm in the same room with so many people who are these forward thinkers who are trying to push our industry forward. And what it's going to take for our industry to move forward is really going to take each of us showing up in different ways. And a great way to show up in a different way is to expand your network, come to things like this, feed your mind, and we will get moving here. Hope you guys are surviving teach from home day. My kids are home yet again. Because of all the snow and ice, that scary snow and ice in North Carolina. But we are going to dive in right here. If you have not checked out our year in review, there should be a link on the console for you to check that out. Our company continues to put out resources, toolkits, things like that. And 2025, we put out more than ever. So I guarantee you there's something in there that you haven't looked at yet that you can leverage inside your own program. Remember, our job is to drive influence. We want to create the circumstances for more compliant behavior in our companies. And we're going to do that by influencing the human beings whose behavior determines whether our company is compliant or not. So pick something from there, check out some of those toolkits. And also check out the updated brand new MySim. So we've done a full UI UX overhaul. We have done full dashboard overhaul. And we are trying to create tools that help you to do your job better. When you can spend more of your time doing the things that only you can do and less of your time doing the handwork that a system should be able to take care of, then you can drive a lot more impact. Your job is a lot more fun and so forth. So if you have not seen our new category assignment rule or our new case assignment rules, our new category hierarchy that allows you to get much better analytics in real time right at your fingertips, or some of the workflows that we have to automate some of the workflow assignments or approvals, click that demo button and buckle up for a no pitch zone demonstration. All right, with that, let's get a massive emoji explosion for the one and only Jason. Jason, great to see you, man. Welcome to the Ethicsverse. He's never been to the Ethicsverse before as a guest, so let's really give him a warm welcome. How's it going, buddy?
Good, great to see you, Nick. Yes, I am suffering from that Snowmageddon light down here in Atlanta. So our kids are out back in school today, but we're out yesterday preemptively as a concern for 33-degree weather. So from Michigan,
well, you just never know.
Is a summer day.
You just never know.
Yeah.
Yeah, in North Carolina, if like a meteorologist just says snow, schools kind of get canceled. So anyways, we're making our way through it.
Same.
All right, so today we are going to be talking about work-slop. So what is work-slop? How is it showing up in our organization? How is our over-reliance or blind allegiance to AI creating undue or unknown risks inside of our organization? So we're going to be talking about some compliance frameworks that can mandate and enforce human review of AI decisions. There's a lot of black box decision making going on. We're going to talk about inversion techniques to identify some of the worst case AI failures before implementation to really kind of help our organization see around the curve, and how we can leverage all of this change that's coming from AI to really position ourselves and our departments within our organization as business enablers. The thing that has has continually come up in the first couple of sessions this morning at this ECI Fellows conference. And if you guys have not checking out ECI, you should really check it out, because Compliance Week is rocketing forward. ECI is rocketing forward with a bunch of great events and thought leadership. But this theme that keeps coming up is the importance of us being able to connect to the objectives of the business, and being able to sing from the business's song sheet to really get things unstuck. So we're going to be talking about all those things today. But Jason, why don't we start out talking about this slop problem and really trying to understand AI-generated errors in a clinical setting? Maybe give us a little bit of your background, and then we can pivot into like what is Work-Slop in the healthcare AI context.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Again, thanks for all the participants. I'll just give a quick rundown. So my full-time work that I do on a daily basis, I'm the Assistant Vice President for Ethics, Advanced Care Planning, Spiritual Health, Language Access for WellStar Health System, which is a large integrated health system in the state of Georgia, and now in the tip of South Carolina, right near the border with Georgia. I oversee all those departments, but my background is in philosophy and ethics. That's the work I've done for a number of years. I've worked for a variety of healthcare organizations to stand up sort of clinical and organizational ethics programs, and sort of to think about how we make decisions as an organization, how do we live out our values, do that kind of work. And so no surprise, Nick, over the the time that I've been in my career, we've come up with a lot of new technology and been able to see some of these things come to fruition for good and for bad. And there are lots of ethics things that come up as a result of them. And AI is one. I just heard something this morning that said someone thinks that AI is all going to fall apart in the next 2 years. I don't know if you've heard these reports that are coming out. And I don't want to chastise OpenAI, but they're saying that 2 years is the fiscal endpoint for what the money they currently have. And so if they don't raise any more additional funds or money, that they're going to run out. And so what will happen to AI? It will basically become this item on the shelf that we might use and apply in certain contexts. Now, me, I don't think that's happening. Not the way I see it in healthcare. In my experience with both the organization I work for now, that I've worked for, those that I've worked for in the past, and those who I do some work with on the, to help them think through these types of ethics issues that occur in the AI space. I think it's going to continue to grow. I think AI is going to have a huge impact in healthcare. I mean, it already has, and I think it's just going to keep growing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, but it is kind of this tale of two cities. Like our timeline can really go in a bunch of different directions at this point in terms of like, what the true impact is going to be, the extent to which it's used, whether it falls apart, whether it takes over like Skynet, you know what I'm saying? Like, who knows what's going to happen at this point? I tend to think that any kind of chaos creates a lot of opportunity. Like there's always opportunity in change. And like over the last year plus, as AI has really kind of started to soak into our organizations, there has been a ton of chaos. How do we get our arms around it? How do we make sure that we're not opening our business up to undue risk? How do we put policies in place that actually end up, avoiding some of these bad behaviors or these bad outcomes that, AI is hoping to help us, achieve the good outcomes sort of in a more efficient way. But this concept of AI slop is one that I think is really interesting because it's not something that gets talked about a lot, right? You have all of this marketing, like my Twitter feed is all about AI right now. You have all these people talking about the upside of AI, but nobody's talking about sort of some of these like negative externalities that come along with it. And as us as human beings begin to change, we're changing the way we do our work. There's a different mix of our own sort of agency. There's a different mix of our reliance on these pieces of technology in the delivery of whatever units of value that we in our particular roles or the sort of aggregate provision of value or generation of value that our organizations provide. That mix is changing, and I think we have not yet seen kind of what the potential fallout for that is going to be. Everyone's talking about like the upside. Everyone is talking about the gains that are going to come from AI. What we're going to be talking about today is the the short term kind of work slop, AI slop, and what some of the costs of that might be. So when you're thinking about like work slop in a healthcare AI context, how do you think about it? Like, what do you think it is, and where are some ways that it shows up?
Yeah, so Nick, it's interesting you say that. I think you're right. I think there's been this undertone of people talking about this notion or this idea about work slop, but no one's kind of put their name on it, or maybe they have. And so there's a couple different definitions. I think We were talking the other day, there was a recent article that came out in Harvard Business Review that was talking about AI Work-Slop. And, what does that mean? I think when I think about it as in terms of like when a tool or AI sort of generates, plausible looking outputs that shift the cognitive burden to a different resource. So you task me with work, I go to AI, I put that data in, right? That thing that I want it to do, and then it dumps it out. I take it, I give it back to you. The question is, shouldn't a human review that? Shouldn't I review that? That's where the slop sort of comes in. The interesting thing in the healthcare context, we see this a lot, that slop can actually be, someone else might be like a physician at 2 a.m. in the morning, or a nurse who's got, 6 additional patients today, or whatever the thing is. There's always oftentimes a patient on the other side of these things. And so the efficiency and benefit that AI can bring us is real. You are never going to hear me say no to AI. That is not one thing I'm going to say. I use it in my daily practice. I think it's valuable to me. But I think we're all seeing humans who are exhausted and who get these things that come into them that feel like help, right? That they're supposed to be resources for us. This AI tool is supposed to be a resource for us, but not what it is it becomes a hazard. And I think one of the things that I start thinking about, and I'll tell you this, is not just a healthcare phenomenon. I've written about this in the past. There's a phenomenon called moral distress that occurs in healthcare. That's where it started. It was in the 1980s. This phenomenon is where you know the right thing to do, but you're prevented from doing it. That was the original definition of it from a guy named Jameson. What we found is that definition shifted over the years, and I think they're right. The newer definitions is it's really the experience of an ethical challenge, dilemma, conflict, or uncertainty, and having psychological stress as a result of it. And those two things are causally connected. It's a colleague of mine at Cleveland Clinic, Georgina Morley. She came up with this new definition. I think she's spot on. I've seen that, right? And I see that daily in healthcare when we're creating this moral distress, because oftentimes clinicians or people who work in healthcare practice, I think it's everywhere, to be honest, are under a lot of cognitive overload, right? There's so many things that they have to do. I wrote about the whole Wells Fargo fiasco that happened a number of years ago. We're opening the accounts. And it struck me in the reports that I read about these folks that that's what they were experiencing. The frontline tellers, or the people who were opening these accounts, were probably experiencing moral distress. They knew the right thing to do, but they were put in a weird situation. And so they didn't know how to resolve that conflict. And so they got psychologically stressed. And to your point earlier about how do we change human behavior, we didn't put in systems or structures or resources for those folks to be able to have outlets to think through that stuff. And so what ends up happening? And I think that's what AI is stepping into the space to do, not to fix moral distress, but to help with that cognitive overload. But I think the challenge becomes that AI looks like it's being helpful, but maybe it's generating so many errors in what it does that we're not conscious of those errors. And so it creates more cognitive work that we have to do again and again and again.
Yeah, that increased cognitive load leads to, potentially leads to some negative, outcome, right?
Yeah.
And this, the advent of AI, or perhaps the reliance on AI, to the extent that it reduces that cognitive load, can give us that sort of false sense of security that we're getting to the right answer, but the outcome is going to be the outcome. It's either going to be the right outcome or a negative outcome. So in some ways, it almost increases the odds that a negative outcome occurs. Just the path to that negative outcome is maybe a little bit more cozy. It's a little less uncomfortable or something like that.
Yeah. And what's interesting about that, Nick, too, thinking about how we extend that out. So say it's in healthcare, but it doesn't have to be in healthcare. I just work a lot in healthcare. It doesn't have to be in healthcare. When you go and something happens and there's an error that happened as a result of AI or some tool being implemented, it's not going to be, Nick, well, what happened? Why did you do that thing, right? And you're going to say, oh, it was the AI tool. It gave me some rec, or it did some, created some order, or something happened as a result because all the data was in there. They're not going to ask you. They're not going to say, well, then let's go take the AI to court, right? Let's put, the AI program up on the stand. No, they're going to say, Nick, you are the responsible person for this. Yes, the tool was there to help you move along. And I think that's where the slop comes in, is that it's because of the cognitive overload, we allow these things to sort of progress. And in patient care potentially make errors that have a significant impact.
Yeah, I think that's right. I don't think, to your point, that sort of excuse holds any water or is actually a defense, right? Like, we have to be that, like, whatever somebody hands to me is their work product, whether they did it on a napkin, they had their grandmother type it on an old school typewriter, or they had AI put it out. And I think that reliance is what kind of the trust of the system is sort of built on. So just to kind of make sure that we're on the same page about terms, Work-Slop is really this like accumulation of poor quality automated outputs. Sometimes they're hallucinated answers, generic treatment plans, or whatever that we end up relying on or that are fed back into the system that ultimately, in the context of healthcare, degrades the overall quality care, the quality of care for our clients and so forth. So again, the challenge with the AI component is that we think at some level, and we might be wrong or we might be right, but we perceive sometimes that we're like we're like reducing the volatility of answers, right? Like the quality of the answer seems good because it's coming from a machine and so forth. And the level of trust or reliance that we allow ourselves to have on those outcomes can sometimes be unfounded, and we can end up getting egg on our face. And so as this pressure comes down from the top, from all these headlines in the Wall Street Journal about organizations that are adding 10 points to their margin, or they're getting rid of their entire support team or whatever by like leveraging AI, all those things create a keeping up with the Joneses kind of effect across organizations as executives try to push and pressure more AI use to drive more margin, drive more growth, and so forth. And sometimes we see how the adoption of these tools can lead to sort of like unforeseen consequences. So how are you seeing, Jason, how are you seeing organizations who are how are you seeing them deploying AI without consent, and like what kind of decisions are you seeing that are being automated by these technologies?
Yeah, it's fascinating. I think I've heard from a number of colleagues across the field about this kind of stuff where AI is being implemented. I think I heard from a colleague up north about AI being used to screen patients for cardiac interventions, right? Or to screen for an orthopedic procedure. So it's using an AI tool that's reading the X-ray or maybe reading the echocardiogram or whatever it may be, and it's making a referral out for some X service, right? So it reads, Nick, your knee injury, it reads it, and it's like, oh, no, that's just an inflammation. It's fine. Bam, and it exports out. So then the physician gets it. And the point is it's supposed to be human-centered, right? The human is supposed to review it and do it. And what I think is happening, it's just my experience from talking with colleagues across the country, is that I think we get comfortable in that AI. To your point, we get comfortable. And so when we get comfortable and we auto-click, it's not auto-click, but we are still the human and click on that. It's like, yep, go forward. Nick doesn't need surgery. We're going to do that. We've sort of accepted this slop, right, as it were, and let it go forward. And then that's where errors start to happen, right? You come back, you're 6 weeks later, the knee is still bothering you. We look at it again, we do a new scan, we do something else, and then magic presto, we don't follow the AI. And what happens? We see that maybe it was something else. Maybe it was there before, maybe it wasn't. I think that's where a question where it gets problematic. I think the other thing that I'm seeing nationally is about, to your point about consent and the use of AI. So I was talking with someone the other day, their healthcare system was going to bring residents in. And so for the group who don't know this, these are trainees, right? They've gotten their medical degree. They're now in their residency program. They can last, 1 to 7, however many years. And they said they were talking about the signage they were going to put on the wall to let people know that residents were going to be training here. I always find it really fascinating. And so they started reading me the description, and it made me think about, that's interesting that we tell patients that we have trainees working here, right? That Nick, you're gonna come in and see your PCP, and there's gonna be a sign, and it's gonna say, hey, there's a trainee working here. But I don't hear a lot of organizations saying that around training the use of tools in AI or implementing AI, right? Like that it's not actively being engaged, whether it's consent or whether you need to consent or not, I think is a philosophical issue, whether you need to use to the consent. But I wonder what people think about healthcare and AI being used. Now, I actually, like I said before, I'm a big supporter. I think it should be. I think as long as, to the point, there's always a human reviewing it, and the human has the ability and doesn't have the cognitive overload to not be able to review the result that AI kicks back. But that whole conversation I had just even a couple weeks ago about this notion that we do inform folks that trainees are happening here, but we don't talk oftentimes, and we should, about that training, AI training is happening on your data, right? Or that AI tools are being used to enhance your care. I think for the most part, maybe I'm wrong, people will believe that it's for the benefit of their care. I really do believe that's the case. I think a lot of these AI tools are amazing and really do help clinicians in their daily work and offload some of that. But I wonder what that looks like. Like, what does it look like to inform a patient that you're actually doing that work before?
What do you think the reticence is to,
doing it?
Put a sign up about that, so to speak, as opposed to, with residents?
Yeah, it's new. I just think it's new. It's not, my initial, when you asked the question, my initial thought was to say, well, maybe it's because it's changing so fast. There's so many different ones that could be used. But I think their residents are changing so fast, right? Like you have new residents rotating in and out of a clinic. So it's not like that can't be the problem. I think it's just a new thing. And we sort of haven't figured out the guardrails and the ways that we think about how AI influences decision-making and what it does to us as practitioners or people in organizations. That the audience here today, thinking about the benefits, to your point, that there are lots of great benefits, but have we thought through the sort of the negative effects? Like there's been a lot more conversation, and I think in the last 12 months about that, but maybe we just need to. Let's just slap a sign up on the wall before you come in, right? Or put it in we call it a general authorization to treat. When all of you come into the healthcare setting, you sign a general form that says, I'm giving you authorization to treat me, right? It's going to bill my insurance. You're going to be able to do basic things to me. Great, put it there. I mean, I think it could be simple. The question then becomes, Nick, what percentage of patients will actually read that stuff, right? So yes, maybe you've discharged your duty for information, but has the duty to ensure understanding been met, right? Yes, you can discharge your duty by having the resident sign, but what does it mean to have a resident involved in your care, right? We don't say, well, you're only going to have PGY1s, right, which are first year, versus you're going to have third years, or there's going to be a third year supervised. Like, we don't get into those nitty details. I don't think we actually have to, but there's lots to unpack over time as we're using this. But I think that the short and sweet is just slap it up on the wall. Hey, innovative technologies at use here, or AI in use here. The question, Nick, that comes natural to mind is, can you opt out? Like, what does that look like to opt out?
Right.
I don't know.
You brought up this comment about human in the loop. And I want to talk about this in kind of two different ways. Like the first way, I want to talk a little bit about like how the reliance on AI can ultimately degrade human oversight. And what that actually means for human in the loop. So, zooming out, I love conversations like this because there's so much change coming. There's not like tried and true, etched in stone sort of like guidance and guardrails and like frameworks for how to navigate with this stuff. Because to your point, this stuff is changing so fast, and the use and the intersection with our, specific organizations is probably, across the whole spectrum. So I think it's helpful to start thinking about like some of these risks, obviously these surface level risks, but kind of these second and third order risks that are happening. And, we talk about AI policies. We've had a bunch of webinars on that, having a really strong AI policy. The thing that always comes up is exactly what you said. Well, look, we want to have a human in the loop. We want someone sort of double checking these outputs before somebody presses send and so forth. But I want to talk a little bit about, the fact that sort of implicit in that assumed control is sort of an assumed sort of like constant efficacy of that control. And I don't think that necessarily us being, humans, I mean, it's in the word, right? Or it's in the term human in the loop, humans who are, let's say lazy, or let's say, seek the path of, optimization or the path of least resistance. I don't know how safe it is to assume sort of a constant level of like vigilance from that human in the loop. It's like the person at TSA who's never seen a freaking bomb. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
How much are they checking the luggage is my point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, Nick, you're spot on. I think about it in a couple levels. So you're right about human in the loop. I think there's human in the loop at like the local level. So if a tool is being implemented, it's giving me recommendations. How is the human in the loop in that setting? Then I think it's about stepping back to your right, to your policy stuff. Let me just say a quick caveat about the policy thing. You can build the greatest policy in the world, Nick, you know this, and then you put humans in charge of actually implementing it, and then it all falls apart, right? So you can have all the structures. I think what we see, my experience, see nationally around AI policy, is a lot of it is not under grid, or it doesn't have the foundation of the values that are supposed to be driving why we're adopting or not adopting AI policy. And so it just, lots of AI tools are out there. There's all these, vendors, great, good, bad, big, small, whatever, who are coming to organizations. And so what's the driving factor in which we decide to adopt an AI tool or not adopt an AI tool? And that's what your policy should talk about, is what are the core values that we think each of these tools are promoting? And then how do we align those values with this tool? Like, we're going to do this tool. Oh, it's going to shave off X number of time. Okay, that makes sense for us. Here's why, and then we adopt it. Okay, so I think that's the first thing. But second, when I think about human in the loop, I think about the broader work I've done, and thinking about how do we look at the data post implementation, right? To your point, yes, we say a human's going to review it local, but then I got to be transparent with you. I hear very rarely do people talk about how frequently they go back and review the adoption of an AI tool. Right? Totally. It doesn't happen. And they're not checking to see, did these erroneous things happen? Like Nick's knee, hey, he came back. Like, should we look at that? So yes, we should look at a local level, but I think we need to start abstracting back. So think about it in healthcare. Are there certain disease states that we need to be keyed in on, that maybe there's high risk associated with them, right? Like a lot of cardiology stuff, just pick any neurology. I mean, you can pick any specialty, to be honest, they all have their own. But are we looking at population data after we've implemented these tools and saying, do there appear to be anything off with the way the recommendations go or don't go? Are there patients that are not getting services that ought to? There's a really fascinating article. I think it's either Science or Nature. I'm blanking on it. I can send it to you, Nick, afterwards. I'll find it. But they looked at a tool, I think it was an AI tool, that was making recommendations for services once the patient left the hospital. Okay, so it was screening, it was taking all these factors into account, and they would say, yep, these people get the services afterwards, these people, you get these other different services. So if I remember the article correctly, what they found was that someone looked at the data at the population level and noticed that African Americans were not getting many of the services. And they thought that was really off. Like, why was it that this is the case? So they looked into it and found out the data that it was trained on was using, if I remember correctly, it was using data where people access healthcare, the healthcare system in a particular way, have certain socioeconomic statuses, have certain insurance statuses. And so what did that do? It precluded a whole large population of the Medicaid or Medicare population. And so that data, when the data trained, it didn't take into effect those things, right? These socioeconomic factors. And so it kept referring it to all the white males. That's what from what I remember of the article. So then they put that data back in, and magic presto, the referral for services for African-American populations went up 47%. So I think when I think about human in the loop, it's human at the point of intervention, and it's human in the loop on the back end to look at the data on a regular interval time frame where we're saying we're going to evaluate this tool after it's been implemented and think about what impact is it having on the data, on the care as a population. Not saying that fixes everything.
I love that framework, right? Because everyone, to your point, everyone's talking about human in the loop at the instant of decision, or like at sort of the micro level. But without sort of human in the loop at the macro level, you can get a bunch of, essentially errors, right? Like you can not notice sort of an error in this broader system. And how interesting that it took that sort of longitudinal analysis in the aggregate to see all these individual sort of patient experiences and see that this one population got kind of materially different treatment recommendations than the other population based solely on how that model was trained. And so I think, again, zooming out a little bit into the opportunity that I think this provides to ethics and compliance departments who often struggle with like connecting with the business, bringing value, being that trusted advisor that we all aspire to be. from conversations like this and listening to people like you, we can start to come to these conversations within our organization with a unique perspective that is really going to actually add value, because that's probably not something that everybody is considering when this sort of Avengers team is sort of assembled to build an AI policy that's going to affect all these different departments within the organization. When we can keep that quality of care, back to your values point, as like our North Star, or keep those values of our organization as the North Star, and intersect some of these controls or considerations, I think we can show up in a much more credible way and really add a lot more value,
Yeah, I mean, Nick, it makes me think of like, so I'm thinking outside of healthcare, thinking about banking, right? And I imagine there's some folks on here from the banking industry on here, and thinking about how we make referrals about who gets approved for loans and who doesn't get approved for loans. And there's a lot of new AI tools. I was reading about some the other day about that banks are using to do that work, right? To scan all the data to make good decisions on who's going to be, a good repair, who's not going to be, whatever the criteria are. But the criteria are established by the foundation of what we think is important. Like, we're here to give back to the community. That's what we are here to do. Let that drive how that AI tool is going to be used. And then on the back end, the human in the loop takes that criteria and evaluates, are we actually doing that, right? You can random sample large data sets and say, look, is there disproportionate here amongst I'm making this up, but right-handed people? Oh, we seem to favor right-handed folks versus left-handed folks, right? Or people who step with their left leg, or or whatever it is, ambidextrous. Like, pick anything you want. All right, we can specify, and those criteria should matter to us as organizations, and that's the value that ethics and compliance officers can bring back. You're tying into, right, organizational mission, right? Their core probably strategy pillars and their strategy about the things that they're trying to accomplish for the organization. This type of work touches all of that. Right? AI is going to plug into growth. It's going to plug into finance. It's people, right? It's quality, it's community, whatever the pillars are of the organization, the strategic, that work connects right back to it. And so the ethics and compliance officer can say, look, what I'm trying to do when we implement AI with this policy is, and the human in the loop, is to make sure we're living out those things that we promised our community that we're living out, or our shareholders, or whatever it may be.
I heard this term. I think that's absolutely spot on. And I heard this term in one of the sessions this morning at this conference. And this gentleman was talking about, being the sort of, I'm going to kind of mess this up, but like the organizational drift reduction department. And like, we can provide, to your point, a lot of value in making sure that our organization doesn't inadvertently sort of drift off mission or drift off the path toward value creation in the way that like we want it to be. And again, part of that is helping our organization see around the curve and consider some of the sort of like negative externalities that come from over reliance on a technology that is essentially making decisions for us. I got a couple of great questions in the chat here. One from Angela. Angela, thanks for this. Do you think there is a stigma around using AI? Do people not want to openly admit to using it because it feels like quote unquote cheating?
Yeah, well, 1,000%, 1,000%. I'm going to draw the analogy in healthcare. It was Angela, I think, if you said Nick. Right now in healthcare, this is a little off topic, but I promise I'll tie it all back together. The weight loss drugs that are happening right now. There are lots of people with a stigma associated with using these weight loss drugs that are out there because they feel like it's cheating, right? It's cheating. Now, here's the thing. I have a really strong opinion about these weight loss drugs. What I will say is, listen, I think obesity is a disease. It's a disease that people have, right? And so why wouldn't we use the tools available to help us battle that disease, right? And so weight loss drugs are just one thing. So to AI, yes, I think there's stigma, just like there's stigma with the medications. I think there's stigma, but it's a tool to help us be better in the work that we're doing. If you're starting to use the tool so that it makes you lazy or whatever, that's a different problem. But as long as we sort of have a core focus on what we're using, why we're using AI, what value proposition it brings to us and as an organization. So I would say to Angela, do you use AI to help you write emails, right? Do you do whatever it may be? I just used it last night. I was looking I couldn't come up with the right words to say to somebody. I mean, I was struggling. That's Nick, we've talked enough. I usually have a problem with words. Like, I can speak forever. That's not my issue. But I couldn't think of the right words. but I wanted to make sure I was compassionate and connected back to this person. So I put it in, hey, I'm struggling, X, Y, and Z. Can you help me just brainstorm? So it did. I took that, didn't let it, there was some sloppiness in what the AI gave me back. Some of it was super not appropriate. And I used it and then crafted my own thing that felt authentic to me. But that sort of tool helped me sort of stimulated new neurons and making new pathways. And so I think, to her ultimate question, I think there is a stigma. I think it will go away. And I think we should, but just making sure we're using AI for the right purposes, right? Is this core to who I am? How is it changing? Is it changing my voice? How do I make sure that doesn't happen? How do I stay true to myself, is knowing, what values and purpose and all those things that you have. And I think can be extracted back to organizations. It's the exact same thing.
Thanks for that. Regarding like the disclosure thing with the sign on the wall, there's a good question here from Kelly. Do you see regulations moving toward mandatory disclosure? Do you feel like it's going to take too long for like regulation? Regulations sort of like famously are just like late to the party all the time.
Yeah, it's
Is it a function of that? Like, do you think it's going to get to that point? And if so, like, what do you think that might look like?
Yeah,
Thanks,
so
Kelly.
1,000,000%. I think the regs are not going to catch up in time. I think even if we only have 2 years, right, for AI, I think it'll be too slow to catch up. I think what I would say, to Kelly is something like the effect of, who do we think we are as an organization? What do we stand for? How does AI tie into that? And shouldn't we tell our community about the tools that we're using to make it better for them, right? Again, I am literally a broken record every time I talk because I say this because everything seems to me to drive down to who do we say we are, right? And so maybe we don't wait for mandated disclosure. Maybe we say we're going to get out in front of it because, one, make it a risk issue. It's a risk that we think our community would be concerned about if we're using this and they're unaware of it. So do it that way, and don't wait for the mandatory disclosure. I don't even think it's a risk thing. I think it's, what's the right thing to do? Do we think if I could put on a hat that said, what would a reasonable person want to know about the work that we're doing that impacts their life? Would they want to know that? I think most people would. I don't think it will make them averse to engaging with you. I really don't. But maybe I'm Pollyanna for that reason. Maybe there's too much positivity. But
that's what we love about you. We love your Pollyanna-ish nature.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I generally tend to be Pollyannish, but I think that people will continue to come. I don't think it will impact in a significant way. Will there be people who fall off? Sure. But if I were, guiding a company, I would say beat the mandatory disclosure rules that come down. Let's get out in front of it and be super transparent with our community.
Yeah. I mean, very few organizations are really like doing the bare minimum. Everybody seems to have a standard over and above whatever regulations are in place. And so I would say, to your point, if a disclosure is in line with your values, irrespective of whether a regulation exists, then maybe that's something that makes sense, I just want to talk a little bit more about this human in the loop thing and the sort of false sense of security it can provide. We talked a little bit about maybe how to combat that by having a little bit of a higher level human in the loop that's looking at sort of aggregate data to see some trends and stuff like that. But do you think it's even a protection? Like, is it kind of a legal fiction at some level? Like, does it actually provide the defensibility either in actuality or from like a legal perspective that we think it does?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let me say this. First and foremost, I'm not a lawyer. Don't want to be one. Never was going to law school. Philosopher's background, so that's where I'm coming from. What do I think it does? Look, I'm not. My expertise is not organizational risk either, Nick. Right? But what I will say is, I do see it. Right, in the work that I do with organizations across the country, whatever sector there may be in, be it healthcare, whatever, I do see this sort of these organizational risks popping up, and so I, again, Pollyanna, think and strongly believe that doing what I would quote unquote doing the right thing, which I know there's lots of questions about what that means, but doing our best to do the right thing does provide some incentive, right? I'll give you the analogy, or it does provide us some protection. Sorry, incentive's the wrong word, protection. I'm going to give you the analogy, and again, I'm going to misquote this study, but it's close enough. All right, we'll call it close enough. So they looked at what is the number one predictor of whether you're going to sue your provider after an error happens. Do you have any sense, Nick, what you think that is?
Just no, I don't know.
Okay, it's trust. It's trust.
Interesting.
Trust is the number one predictor whether, like, do I trust my doctor? Like, there have been studies. Again, I'm probably not going to accurately represent these. I don't have them on the tip of my tongue. But there's a study, I think, that looked at wrong-sided site surgery. So, Nick, you come in. I'm sorry, you have all these medical ails when talking to me, but you came in. You have gangrene of your left arm. Okay, so we have to cut your left arm off. You come in. Someone marks your right arm as the arm to be cut off. So we go back into surgery. They check. Yep, it's the right arm, and they cut your right arm off. Now, you come out of the surgery, you still have to have the left arm cut off because it's gangrenous, right? So you still need to cut it off. So now you come out of the surgery and you have no arms. Now, are people going to sue in that situation? Probably, okay? But the predictor of whether they're going to sue, one of the biggest predictors is whether they trust you beforehand or not, whether they trust you and then they trust you afterwards. Are you telling the truth? Are you being open and transparent? Are you doing all those things? So I'm not a trust guru. That's not really the shtick I have, but I think trust is the same thing for any other organization. Our community does things, believes in us because they trust us to do the things that we're supposed to be doing, that we say we live up to. And I think maybe that's the protective effect that it gives. If they trust that we're doing these things because we're living according to our values, which the community who accesses us and uses our services, whatever they may be, whatever industry you're in, be it healthcare, but non-healthcare sector, that is built on trust. That we trust you're going to live up to your values. And so if you decide not to disclose, not to, do audit, reviews or audits of this stuff, that seems to violate that work. And it will come out, right, that you didn't do that work and you didn't live up to who you say you were supposed to be.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of an interesting point. If we're solving for trust, we might look at all of this stuff a little bit different, Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about how we combat this automation bias, because I think this automation bias leads to a lot of work slop. It leads to a lot of AI slop. How do we combat that and stop, again, given the fact that these are human beings operating all these systems and doing all these procedures and having all of these interactions. And we know that human beings, take that path of least resistance, coupled with this. So there's this sort of inherent wiring within us. And then there's also this sort of top down sort of exogenous pressure to do more with less and go faster and be better, bigger, better, faster, all that kind of stuff. How do we combat that as an ethics and compliance department within a healthcare system or within any kind of an organization?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good point. A couple thoughts, and maybe I'm going down a different rabbit hole, but let's see if this is what if you think this makes sense to you, Nick, or to the viewers, to be honest. So how do we combat bias? There are lots of tools out there that have been developed to combat bias or to maybe move us away from slop. I think, we can look at all the work of, Danny Kahneman. I think Max Bazerman has done a lot of work in this space. When we look at, how do we generally think about our cognitive blind spots that we're unaware of just because they naturally happen to us. That's how I like to think about all these things. There's some standard things like red teaming that the military was well known for. There's I often think about there are external modes that we can do to combat that stuff. There's a really famous study that looked at putting pictures of your loved ones up in your office and how that actually combats your responses to the work that you do, whether you'll be more than willing to adhere to someone asking you to do something inappropriate. That pictures actually decrease the rate in which you would respond. So I think there are external things that we can do. I think the biggest thing I think about when we try and combat it is, and maybe this is off point, but I think about healthcare and the way that healthcare works after the fact. So we've got this fixation in healthcare, which I think is right on, that when some error or wrongness, or we followed something we shouldn't have followed, what do? We do a root cause analysis. We try and, find out exactly where was how did the Swiss cheese happen, where it went through it, harmed a patient, or caused some problem that it shouldn't have caused. And so we do root cause analysis in that case. those are amazing. They work well. They help us change systems. They help make sure we're aligned with the values that we speak about, whatever it may be. I think the other big thing that I think a lot about, and you and I have talked about this before, is I think about we shouldn't wait. Why are we waiting to the end to the problem to happen? Like, why are we waiting for this bias to kick in? Let's think about how it might happen preemptively, right? So the thing I was telling you, I think we talked about this earlier, a long time ago, about this notion of a pre-mortem. So thinking about before the bad thing, before the death happens, before the bad event happens in healthcare, why not try and plan that out, that it actually could happen? So we're going to implement this AI tool. It's going to be in the oil industry. What is the worst thing that could happen? 6 months down the road, what does that look like? And when we figure that out, then we go back from that to create steps to prevent it. It's crazy. I was just on a conversation the other day. Someone was asking me for tips about interviews. Nick, this is totally unrelated, but I think it all connects together. I came up with this interview question, and I ask it of everybody I interview. I say, fast forward 6 months for me hiring you. What's the problem you have? Like, what's the problem you're going to have here? And then I say something like, tell me why that should mean I shouldn't hire you, right? And we talk through that. And what that gets that person doing is thinking about, okay, I'm 6 months into the system. I've heard of all the things that they're doing. What is the thing I'm going to falter on, right? Oh, I don't have enough experience. I don't have enough of this. That's the problem. And then what do I do? So I know when I hire you, Nick, I'm going to say, Nick's going to need this. I know 6 months down the road, he's going to be in this predicament. So let me set up the situation to solve it here, now, before Nick gets to that. Are there going to be new problems? Yeah, of course. I can't stop the problems, but at least I can know about the ones that I think Nick is perceiving, that I'm perceiving, and then put structures in place to actually try to address them. So I think we can do that with AI. I think we can do that with implementation of innovative technology, of anything, to be honest. So say, let's implement it. What's going to happen, right? What is going to be the downside of this going?
That kind of a habit, or that kind of a cadence to just do a pre-mortem, is a phenomenal, approach to mitigate risk, regardless of the scenario. Obviously, not just with AI, because to your point, it helps you kind of see around the curve, and it helps you work back from like some of these worst case scenarios, from like more of like a top down perspective, and then you're just sort of by definition not living in that kind of reactionary mode. So I love that idea. I have a question here. Let's go to this comment here. And oh yeah, okay. Well, see, I had something to say and I just needed to dig it out. All of these cognitive biases that we have, right? Like if you read Kahneman or any of these, behavioral science folks, they talk about all these like cognitive errors that we as human beings are almost like imbued with.
Yes.
Reading those books and becoming aware of those things do not negate or delete our negativity bias. It at least though gives us some awareness for when that bias may be coming up, right? Like, so that's one I like to think about, all the time. I think this is a great example of these sort of cognitive, errors or these cognitive biases. Human beings have a negativity bias. In the absence of, complete information, we tend to, on average, fill in gaps with like a more negative than is likely kind of a thing. That's just what we're wired for. So, correct. But just becoming aware of that concept does not, delete the odds that we're going to do it. It though gives us at least some awareness for when we might be doing it, so we can keep our eye out for it, and we can really weigh in a more objective way whether the conclusion we've come to in the context of like less than sort of complete information is actually reasonable. And so applying that same kind of thing that you're talking about to a lot of this AI stuff, this allows us to fight against these automation biases or these over-reliance biases or the work-slop, biases that can be coming out of these processes just by raising our awareness and starting to ask some questions like, is that happening here? Might this happen here? How might this sort of happen here? That can allow us, again, to help see around the curve and move out of that reactionary mode. Okay.
So Nick,
Lance,
can I chime in?
Go ahead.
Can I just say one thing about that? Please. I know there's a question in the chat, but I think you're spot on. So there is an awareness thing. Then the other thing that needs to be done is, so awareness, yes. More often than not, we're not even aware of the things that are happening. So we need to be aware. And then there's a step about like, how do we get our brains to actually think about that stuff? So how do we not only just become aware of it, but how do we get our brains into a process where we can actually get to solutions, right? Where we can think about how we overcome that stuff. So I've done a bunch of work on this, and I've thought about like ethical decision-making processes. And every time I I've written a paper about this or whatever. One of the steps that I put in there is reflection. So I think about exactly what you said. You're right. We need to become aware, and then we need to get our brains out of the mode of automatic response, like Kahneman and all, system 1, system 2 thinking. We need to get ourselves into a mode to think about in a cognitive manner what's going on in this particular spot. So yes, I've become aware that I could have this bias here. So what do? I ask. What I often tell people to do is to ask open-ended questions, right? That seems to be the best tool I've ever seen. So Nick, you and I are having a conversation. Our brains are going a million miles a minute. It's all automatic. We're not really doing, there's some cognition happening, but there's so much automatic stuff that's happening. So how do I get out of that when I'm thinking about, should I trust this AI product or not, whatever it may be? The natural tendency, me and the human, is to click it. It's happened positively the last 5 times. So of course I'm going to trust the AI. I'm going to click on it. And then ultimately what ends up happening is slop comes out, right? We send an evaluation back to you, Nick, that has all this garbage in it, includes the AI prompt. I mean, it's got everything. And you're like, oh my God, this is just garbage. So what we need to do is create tools or frameworks or processes for people where they engage a different part of their brain. And I think the easiest way for this to do it is in a situation where, let's just say, I'm going to turn something into my boss, or this is going to impact a patient. I need to ask an open-ended question, and it doesn't have to be about that specific issue. That's what I've found. I don't know if the evidence backs that up, but it could be like, Nick, what's the best way to get home from Fort Lauderdale today? Right? What's the, and so what do? You can't say automatic, oh my God, it's got to be, no, you're going to have to think through it. Like, oh, do I take a flight to Orlando and then go back to, or should I go to Atlanta? And you start processing in a different way. Your brain has to use a lot more of its resources to be able to think of that. I think the exact same thing happens in these contexts. So I got a tool that I've used the tool, and then I need to stop and what I would call reflect, right? And ask myself an open-ended question. It can't be yes or no, right? So it needs to be, what would be the challenge in doing this work this way? And then now my brain has to step into a different space to process that. And it's going to help me catch the things that I need to do. And so it's always training this notion about reflection. The one pushback I often get about this is people will say, well, I don't have time for that. And what I will tell you is, I actually don't think it takes a lot of time. I'm older, I'm not that old, but I do this all the time. In almost every decision I do, I just sit for 1 second and say, what would someone think of this product if I gave it to them? Right? And then that forces me to look at it, right? Like asking those kinds of questions, and it just takes a quick second to do. So sorry for interrupting.
And that's it, we've been talking about, AI slop in the context of tools and like how a clinician might be relying on outputs to sort of drive patient care. The myriad use cases, though, obviously extend way beyond that, and they would extend deep into how like we interact with each other. So odds are people have Copilot enabled, they have ChatGPT, maybe they're using Claude, and people on their team are using that in various different capacities. The sort of facets or like the dimensions of Work-Slop seem to sort of span a lot of different, they show up in a lot of different ways, just on sort of a day-to-day basis, whether it's an email being written or a summary for a case or something like that, or a policy that's being written. Like the different flavors of Work-Slop are, there's a lot. There's a whole spectrum of them. And I think that reflection, that reflection habit can help us as somebody is passing over information to us to get a sense of like, well, how deep is this? Like, is this actually slop that somebody gave us? Are they able to think through the sort of takeaways from it, or are they just sort of passing something up the chain? And I get, again, like everybody's overloaded, everybody's stressed. Everybody only has 24 hours in the day, and they're trying to do the work-life balance thing and all those kinds of things. The propensity for like over-reliance on these tools with a lack of depth and just a bunch of words on the page goes up kind of exponentially. And, I like to say, Work-Slop is your slop. If somebody gives you Work-Slop just kind of internally on your team and you accept it, well, guess what? Now that's yours. And especially to the extent that you're like relying on the takeaways of that might lack the context that you were implicitly relying on the person passing that over to you to like employ and make sure that, those guardrails were, around whatever document or whatever work product we're talking about. If you're accepting that, you're eating it. You know what I'm saying? Like if you're eating rotten meat, well, now that's that's in your body. You know what I'm saying? Well,
so and Nick, you can't blame the AI tool for that, right? Like that's not, you accepted the 100%. Work that the AI
you accepted
put out,
it.
And I gave it to you, Nick. So it is now mine. So is it mine? I mean, we could talk about property or whatever it is, but philosophically, but it is the thing that I gave you, Nick, as to answer the issue that you were addressing. Same thing with any product. That could be true, just like I was saying with the clinician who accepts, right,
Exactly.
an order based on what AI has recommended, or a nurse who doesn't respond to an alarm because the AI tool said that alarm wasn't real, whatever it may be. There's all these things that has to be, that ultimately at the end of the day is the end user product. And so they will be the ones responsible for it.
Yeah. And I think thinking about, this slop risk in the context of your own job, you yourself in your job, relying on somebody else on your team, passing something up the chain that you are presumably going to do something with, you're going to digest that, you're going to put that into your own mind, you're going to put out another work product that's going to go up the chain even further. That's your sort of like output. Thinking about that sort of on that micro level lends a lot of, I think, clues to how we should be thinking about it from an organizational perspective, because to the extent that, an organization's brand is affected by, a negative outcome that is driven by someone's reliance on some AI work-slop, there's not like an asterisk on the headline that says, they killed it, they chopped off both of his arms, but it was kind of an AI thing. Like the outcome is the outcome, irrespective of how you arrive at it,
That's right. That's exactly right. Yep, it's exactly right.
All right, so we got a couple of minutes left. Man, we had so many more questions. This should have been 2 hours. So how do you think we can, somebody who's listening to this, who's trying to sort through, the use of AI, how it's being used, maybe they're responsible for the policy or they're part of the AI governance committee. How do you think they can kind of start to evaluate AI at, AI use among the population to try to catch or prevent or curtail some of these potentially, devastating systematic errors that might be kind of trickling up?
Yeah, I mean, I think, I guess the short answer I'll give is I think there are 3 entry points, right, for this work. So 1, there's development of, 2, it's implementation of, and 3, it's post, right, implementation. And so I think, Nick, along the path, you can think about different ways. So, we've talked a lot about the stuff development or pre-implementation, right? So it's having strong policies, having them undergrid by values, aligning the acceptance of an AI tool with that, thinking about pre-mortems, right? There's implementation, right, work where you look at it to say, what is it actually doing in the moment and getting user feedback from it, right? And sort of saying, what is the tool putting out? And then last is the thing that we talked quite a bit about, and I think is probably the one where we need to focus more work on, which is, we're all going to adopt AI tools. Let's just be honest about that. But let's evaluate them after they're adopted. Like, it's great. Right. A vendor comes to us and says, this AI tool is fantastic. I believe you, vendor. You're right. I think you're right. But I haven't seen it in my system, in my work, in the way that I do it. And so we need to step back and take, 90 days post-implementation, 30 days post-implementation, 6 months post-implementation. Depending on the kind of tool it is, if it's using that data to train itself to get better, right, Nick, to our earlier point, there are lots of errors that are included in medical records. So if that medical record is being used by that AI to continuously learn, is it taking those errors and adding it in and producing further errors, right? I'm not an AI expert about how that all process works, but that worries me. And so how do we get around that worry? I think folks on this call could say, what are we doing post-implementation on a reasonable period of time, whatever that is for the industry, to evaluate whether this tool is living up to what we thought it was going to live up to? Is it living up to who we say we are as an organization? And then is it disproportionately impacting our community, our users, our employees, whatever it may be? And so can it be fixed, or is it a tool that we need to stop? It's the one thing that's fascinating to me, Nick, at the end of the day, is there are lots of things that we adopt in all of our industries where we've just adopted them and let them ride, right? They just continue on.
And we never question it again.
Oh, no. I just was on a call about a month ago, and someone said, well, why are we doing that? I was like, well, I don't know, 11, 12 years ago, someone said we did it, and so we do it. And we've never really evaluated that. I think that's going to be the case too with AI, that we're not going to be thinking long-term about it. And so we need to say, is this tool actually still providing us benefit the way that we want it to? Is it still aligning with our mission and being actively involved in that work? And I think folks on the sort of session today are poised to be in that space to say we need to start thinking about those things afterwards.
Yeah, and I mean, just kind of to your point, just asking those questions are going to engage our, our goal seek mechanism that is our mind to start looking under some rocks and not just kind of setting it and forgetting it. I mean, we have all of these risk management frameworks and sort of instincts that we've built over our careers in ethics and compliance that they just need to be applied to this sort of, I get it that it's like the Wild West and stuff is moving fast and so forth, but like, it's just a series of inputs and outputs. It's just a series of like, business processes and decisions that like are made. It's not really that different. And I think like we just have to not be so scared about, all the smoke and mirrors and get sort of caught up in all the hype, but really kind of be able to see through it and ask those basic kind of inversion questions, ask those how and what questions that, can help us to entertain that, that nightmare scenario. I don't know if you know my friend Reed Blackman, but he just put out a book called The Ethical Nightmare Scenario that is essentially about that exact thing that you talked about. With all of these use cases going on, it's easy to go it's very difficult to go from a bottom-up perspective of all of these risks. You end up kind of over-focusing on immaterial risks or things that are not really like scalable or addressable. Mm-hmm. Instead, he recommends, just like you, to like start thinking about worst case scenarios and work back from that. And that's going to give you a good starting point to start kind of inverting this and building in at least some like instincts, against some of these biases and these negative outputs. All right, well, listen, go ahead. Yeah.
Can I say one last thing to that point?
Of course, dude, yeah.
It's time to conclude. There's a fear when we get out the gate that it's going to be really hard or it's difficult or it's going to take a long time. Maybe true, but I will tell you, as you get better and practice the behavior, it gets easier it does get easier every time. There are new challenges ahead, but like take that first step, everybody. That's what I would say. Take that first step and start to do it and learn from that and continuously improve yourself to make sure you're identifying that slop when it comes out, that what the tools are doing, how the tools are living up, what they're producing, and just really practice, because it's a habitual behavior that will get easier over time. Sorry, that was it.
All right, let's get one more massive emoji explosion for Jason. Jason, this was so good, man. We got to have you back. And if you have not checked out, it's one of the highest reviewed episodes ever of the ethics experts that Jason was on. I think you will really enjoy that as well. So check that out on the YouTube channel or wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And join us next week. We are going to be, or I guess it's this week. It's this Thursday. We're going to be talking about amplifying your voice. Amplifying compliance influence, mastering storytelling and personal branding. So much of your impact in your organization is a function of the influence you're able to put out. That starts with your personal brand. That starts with the brand of your department and how, or the extent to which you're able to sort of shatter those stereotypes that often keep us at arm's length from the decisions that are being made in the organization. So hope you enjoyed it. Jason, thank you so much, and we'll see you on Thursday.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, everyone.